there before the Great War of 1914. Pomp, pageantry, parades. The show of might, with drums beating and guns yet silent. It is peacetime in Imperial Germany in the first decade of our century. The all-highest Wilhelm II, by the grace of God, German Emperor, King of Prussia, has announced to his subjects, "I will lead you into glorious times." Germany, youngest of the world's empires, is powerful, prosperous, proud. But in the expanding glory of Imperial Germany, her neighbors see something else: intimidation. It is the twilight of royalty, governing with romantic serenity over a Europe long accustomed to peace. King George and Queen Mary of England pay courtesy calls on the Queen's aunt, the Dowager Grand Duchess of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, and on the King's first cousin, the Kaiser. War seems a thing of the past. In the words of a young historian named Winston Churchill, civilization has climbed above such perils. Christian charity, common sense have rendered such nightmares impossible. But he adds, it would be a pity to be wrong. Wilhelm II is also related to Nicholas II, Tsar of all the Russias. But beneath dynastic ties run deep divisions. The Kaiser heads the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy. But the Tsar belongs to the Triple Entente: Russia, France, Great Britain. Tsar and Kaiser are on opposite sides in the precarious balance of power which it is hoped will preserve the peace. It would be a pity to be wrong. If Russia is suspicious of German power and France resentful and England wary, the Kaiser can boast an ally elsewhere. Franz Joseph of Austria-Hungary, aging emperor of an aging empire. Among the major powers of Europe, the Kaiser, with an arrogance that breeds antagonism, has alienated the strongest and bound himself to the weakest. Wilhelm II, it is said, is like a man strolling among barrels of gunpowder with a lighted cigarette. And still another royal reception. The Kaiser greets Albert, King of the Belgians, whose neutrality Germany is pledged by treaty to respect. Treaties, alliances, ententes. Everything seems conveniently arranged, permanently settled. And then, June 28, 1914, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is assassinated at Sarajevo in the Balkans. Is an archduke worth a war? On this issue, diplomats and generals begin to enmesh themselves in an unbreakable chain of blind causation. Austria, believing her prestige at stake and her empire threatened, accuses Serbia of instigating the archduke's murder. But if Austria marches, Russia, who also desires to dominate the Balkans, may intervene to stop her. How will Germany react to that? Europe's destiny depends on the answer. The European crisis finds Imperial Germany at the height of her power, at sea as well as on land. Her newborn fleet is an open challenge to the ancient naval supremacy of Great Britain. Her expanding sea power is just one more cause of alarm for her neighbor France and her rival England. And now the Kaiser drops his lighted cigarette. To his ally Austria, he promises support, which the Austrians use as a blank check to break Serbia. With the surface fleet, modern submarines, never before used in war but ready for action, backed by the most potent industry on the continent. So the stage is set as the weeks of July 1914 slip away and the death of the Archduke is all but forgotten in the rush to disaster. As if, says one bewildered observer, the unconscious boredom of peace over nearly 50 unbroken years had stored up in the nations a terrific potential which only awaited an accident to touch it off. The nation slithered over the brink into the boiling cauldron of war. Amongst the rulers and statesmen who alone could give the final word which caused great armies to spring from the ground and march to and across frontiers, not one of them wanted war, according to the English statesman Lloyd George. But Europe goes singing to the battlefields, and in Paris they are saying, "À Berlin, on to Berlin," to recover the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine lost in the Franco-Prussian War, and to support their ally Russia. And in Berlin they are saying, "Nach Paris, on to Paris," to crush an ancient enemy. Belgium's neutrality has become a scrap of paper. With the rape of Belgium, the Great War begins. The hopelessly outnumbered Belgian army stands and resists, and even delays the German drive at Liège, the first setback to the grand strategy of the High Command, which calls for a swift war of annihilation. Yes, the Belgians delay the Germans, but they cannot stop them. Nothing stops the Germans, the Huns as their enemies call them, in their juggernaut advance through Belgium toward Paris and the English Channel. Like a force of nature, a tidal wave, an avalanche, the German armies sweep 250 miles in 14 days. Their government bluntly announces, "We act in self-defense. We have broken international law. Necessity knows no law." Great Britain, August 4th, 1914. With the invasion of neutral Belgium, the British declare war and send their handful of regular army troops, all they have, across the Channel. These men know it's a long way to Tipperary, and they also know there's a long way to go. The Kaiser calls them a contemptible little army, and the soldiers promptly adopt the name, the Old Contemptibles. Not since the days of Napoleon has a major British force fought on the continent, but now their mission is crucial, to bolster the faltering French and save the Channel ports, whose seizure by the Germans would be disastrous for England and her allies. The Hun is at the gate of Paris, and the French use their taxi cabs, every means of transportation, to rush every available soldier to the front, a mere 18 miles away. On les aura, we will get them. And the French do, at the Marne, in the miracle of the Marne, where the Germans are stopped. France goes to battle in the spirit of her commander, General Foch. "My left is broken, my right is weakening, the situation is excellent. I am attacking." Far from the broils of Europe, the United States of America, isolated, self-centered, self-contained, hearing only the vague, distant cry of war. Sympathy, yes, for bleeding Belgium, and there are gifts of food and clothing, but for the rest, the words of President Woodrow Wilson. Be neutral in fact as well as in name, impartial in thought as well as action. The man in the street puts it more simply. It's none of our business. In busy New York, by the beautiful sea, business as usual on Saturday morning, May the 1st, 1915. There's no special reason to notice the date except for those whose goal is Pier 54, where the great Cunard liners dock. Today, a ship, the fastest and largest steamer now in Atlantic service, is sailing for England. The passenger ships are sailing much as usual despite the war. Britannia still rules the waves. With almost 2,000 passengers and crew aboard, the Lusitania sails on schedule, confident that her 25 knots can outrun any German submarine blockading the British Isles. Why pay any attention to an advertisement that appeared in this morning's newspapers? Travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that vessels flying the flag of Great Britain are liable to destruction in the war zone. Signed, Imperial German Embassy. The crossing occupies 6 sunny, uneventful days, and on May the 7th, the shoreline of Southern Ireland is in sight. The voyage is almost over. From the log of the German submarine U-20, Kapitän Leutnant Schwieger commanding. Dead ahead, 4 funnels and 2 masts of a steamer. Clean bow shot from 700-meter range. Nearly 1,200 men, women, and children drowned, including 124 Americans. More, much more than a voyage ends with the sinking of the Lusitania. In the eyes of millions of Americans, Germany becomes an international outlaw, a menace to civilization. Kaiser Wilhelm is made the target of mounting indignation, a symbol of rampant militarism, of ruthless autocracy, of Prussian Schrecklichkeit, frightfulness. Americans begin to think, it is our business. But I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier remains the sentiment of the American Peace Society, the Friends of Peace, and others who demonstrate against any involvement in Europe. Emotional forces are aroused. Deep social currents are running beyond the ability of man to fathom and foresee. In Washington, Woodrow Wilson is serving his 2nd term, re-elected on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Now, the impact of unrestricted submarine warfare, the ties of language, tradition, and commerce with the Allies, the growing revulsion against Prussian militarism, are threatening to force new decisions, new policies on the president. But as leader of the world's mightiest neutral, he would like to remain neutral and become peacemaker to the world by negotiating the end of the war. He advocates, works for, a peace without victory in Europe. To another articulate and forceful American leader, the words of Woodrow Wilson are weasel words. Theodore Roosevelt, ex-president, rough-riding hero of San Juan Hill, and now strenuous spokesman for the Allied cause. Like many another American, he passionately feels that Wilson's moderation is jeopardizing both America's honor and her security. Teddy is for action. Action with armed force if necessary. And millions agree, even if it means, as it does, a break with the isolationist past.